Good, grateful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're tuning in from. I am extremely grateful that you are here attending the International Youth Conference. Before I get started, I would like to thank Ali and Jessica for the opportunity to present here today, and Mary Steiner, the president of the United Nations Association of the United States of America, San Francisco chapter, for hosting us at this conference. My name is Boomer Rose. I'm a grateful recovering addict, formerly incarcerated, formerly homeless, a survivor of child abuse and domestic violence, and I am here today to share my story and how childhood trauma can have a long-term impact on our lives. Before I get started today, I would like to remember all of those that we've lost throughout the last several years and really all time due to overdose and drug addiction. It is for them that I share my story. It is for them that I am here representing my communities. The overarching theme of the beginning of this presentation today is going to be the perception of normal. The experiences that we go through in our childhood are what become normalized to us, right? And for me, that was growing up in a life that was ultimately a lie. You see, I was born of an affair, and my father that I thought was my father growing up was actually not my biological father. And he abused my siblings, my mother, possibly myself, but I can't really remember. And that was normal to me. And in that life of me growing up, there were risk factors that were missed that contributed to my future addictive behaviors. In my childhood, as I said, I was exposed to child abuse. I was exposed to domestic violence. There was family dysfunction. Once my mother finally left her first husband, we went on a transient lifestyle and moved from place to place. My brothers and my sisters ended up staying with friends or even going to a shelter one night after an incident. And it was just my mother and I against the world. And I remember specifically, sleeping in one room next to my mom with her on the bed and me on the floor next to her, and just knowing that everything would be all right because I was with her. This constant trauma throughout my life, was normalized to me. And what we normalize for too long becomes tolerated. And what we tolerate becomes normal. In my adolescence, I finally found out who my biological father was, and my mother and I moved in with him. And I remember that initial feeling of understanding that, hey, this is your dad. And I had always grown up knowing him as Uncle Don, right? But once we moved in with him, we finally had a sense of calm, and that trauma began to slow down. But the impact that had already occurred from the trauma throughout my early childhood lasted. And in this blending of my families together with my father's and my mother's family, there was still risk factors and signs and behaviors that I displayed. I could sit down and I could drink an entire case of Coke in a night, right? I could eat all the time sugary foods. I was addicted to video games. All of these things were risk factors that made me realize now that maybe I shouldn't have picked up drugs and alcohol. In my teenage years, my mother got sick. And I remember it was the first day after my sophomore year of high school. And I woke up in the morning and my mother was laying on the ground, grasping the guest bedroom bed and unable to get up. She was paralyzed from the waist down. My whole family rushed home, and my sisters, Melody and Brenda Lou all came, and we were at a TGI Fridays in Leesburg, Virginia. And I just remember my sister Melody, or Brenda Lou, looking at my sister Melody and saying, if Mom only would have told us sooner, and her kicking her under the table. And it was at that moment that I knew that my mom had been sick for a long time, and everybody in my world around me knew, except me. 6 months later, my mother would pass away due to cancer. I spent the last 6 months of her life, caring for her, leaving school early, and really unable to process these feelings, and to deal with the grief and loss. I remember also, the school counselor coming to visit me one time after my mother passed away, and that was it. That was the conversation. So I was left dealing with these feelings, and that's where I started to begin using alcohol as a coping mechanism to deal with my trauma. My father and I didn't really have much of a relationship. And looking back, 20 years now since my mom passed away, I realized that emotional neglect that was going on between my father and I was because I was the one thing that was keeping them together. I was the constant that brought them together. And without her around, I don't think that he really knew how to relate to me. It's also at that time that, similar to my mother, I found myself in an abusive relationship because that is what was normal to me, right? And the individual that I was in this relationship with had everything that I didn't have. She had a family. She had a home where they ate dinner every night. She had somewhere that I didn't have to be alone with myself and with my thoughts. So I put up with the abuse. But the reality of all of this trauma and these experiences in my life and my upbringing that we just discussed is actually childhood trauma, right? I came from a divorced and broken family. I had incarcerated family members on my father's side. I went through grief and loss. I started abusing substances, domestic violence and child abuse that I was a witness and a victim of, mental illness running in the family, and that emotional neglect, right? All of that was spiraling and hitting me all at once. And what that actually is adverse childhood experiences. And if you don't know what adverse childhood experiences are, it was a revolutionary study done in the 90s by Dr. Ben Spaliti, right? And what he studied is that all of these different negative experiences that children go through actually leaves them more and more susceptible to long-term negative health outcomes, right? So here's the ACEs score right here, or scoring right here, and there's 10 of them. Okay, I have a 9 out of 10 on the ACEs score. That might be a passing grade in whatever class you're in right now, right? But as far as having a healthy lifestyle as you grow up, that is a failing grade. And ACEs, one ACE is predictive of another. And if you have 4 or more, then you're more predicted to have negative health risks, right? And if you have 5 or more, you're 10 times more likely to experience addiction issues. Well, mine's a 9. Right? So the writing was kind of already there of where my life would lead without positive experiences to counteract that. And that ultimately led to my life of addiction. The lack of coping skills and then continued traumatic experiences as I moved on to my young adulthood, lack of support and resources, denial of everything that I had gone through, and really denial of who I was and what my life was. Because, like I said, I didn't even know who my father was when I was born. So I was born into a lie, and all of these lies became my reality. And that continued trauma that happened throughout my college and my early adulthood, I still couldn't cope with my mother's death, and I was dealing with that grief and loss. My father was chronically ill, suffering from liver and kidney disease. I had a lack of support. I was in the middle of this abusive relationship. I had manipulative family dynamics with my father's kids. And ultimately, I also went through the experiences of abortions and miscarriages through several relationships. And that's where my coping skills and the lack of them were ultimately just drugs and alcohol, right? That's a picture of me in college having a good time, right? Trying to forget about all of the trauma that I had been through. But then my addiction progressed, and it was no longer just, alcohol, but I moved on to illicit drugs and prescription drugs. So as my trauma grew and grew, my addiction progressed and progressed. And as you see, the progression of my addiction started when I was 15 years old after my mother passed away and I was abusing alcohol. From there, it escalated to marijuana, which is legalized in so many states now, but it has so many adverse health outcomes and mental health outcomes that, why are we legalizing it? Why are we opening it up to our youth? So if you're a youth and you're considering it, just say no, right? It leads you down a negative path. But then prescription drugs with Adderall, cocaine, and ultimately what would be my ultimate downfall is opiates and IV heroin use in 2012. And this all created a life of chaos. But in the middle of chaos, beautiful things can happen. And I became a father. My son Matthew was born. And let me tell you, I was nowhere near prepared to be a father, right? I was still in the middle of my addiction. His mother and I were using substances, and we did not know how to care for and nurture a child despite all of the love that we had for him. He was our pride and joy, but we didn't love ourselves. And ultimately, I got arrested, and Child Protective Services came and took Matthew away. And I still remember that day just crying and watching him go into the back of that police car. And, knowing that he was safe brought me comfort. And knowing that I was now going to be safe while incarcerated also brought my family comfort because they didn't have to wait for that phone call. There's my arrest record. All of it pretty much stemmed from one arrest. And when I look back to that incident, the police officer came to my house and asked if I had anything that might be of concern. And I showed him my syringes. And he took them and he arrested me. Looking back on that incident, I see that as a sign of reaching out for help, right? And an opportunity to provide resources and education and provide the help that I need, not to put me behind bars where there's no help and support. Incarceration has its challenges, and here in the United States of America, we incarcerate so many individuals for reasons that they don't need to be incarcerated, right? And while you're in there, you don't have resources, you don't have support, you don't have access to programs and good educational programs. You begin to lose your hope. And when I was incarcerated, one thing that I remember is instead of working on myself, I was able to make connections to find, my next score when I got out. Then the criminal justice system, right now that I'm involved in that, offered me a deal that seemed too good to be true. If I just stayed clean and sober for 1 year, then my felony charge would be dropped. But in that year, they didn't provide resources. They didn't provide opportunities for me to learn and to fix myself. So ultimately, I began using drugs again and absconding. My life was spiraling out of control. I had no desire to get clean. I had just lost my son. I'm still dealing with the grief and loss of my mother. At this time, I'm episodic homeless or going from couch to couch, sleeping on the streets if I can't find anywhere. And I have no stable environment. I have no hope. And that spiral ultimately ended up with me not communicating with my family, not seeing my son for several years. And then I hit rock bottom. On January 21st of 2017, I walked into a public restroom at a CVS right before closing, and I used what would ultimately be my last shot of heroin. I remember that feeling of, the burn going up my arm, and then the next thing that I knew, I was being revived by the workers of the CVS. And I got up because I had a warrant out for my arrest, and I just ran. I left everything and I ran. I was scared. And I called several members of my family and several friends, and nobody answered. It was at that moment that I realized that I was alone. I was hopeless, and I was alone. Then on January 23rd of 2017, I realized that I needed some help. And I went to a 12-step fellowship meeting, and I sat through that meeting with tears in my eyes, and I shared my heart out. And I recognized a friend that I knew from college. And I looked at him, and I said, I need help. And he was on the phone 2 minutes later, and he found a rehab that would take me. And then this white van pulled up to the recovery center, and I got in it. I had no idea where I was going. We went to downtown Winchester, Virginia, and I grabbed my bags that I hid behind a dumpster because I had nowhere to put them. And the next thing I knew, I was on my way to rehab. And that rehab, Rivendell Recovery Center in Virginia, ultimately saved my life and changed my life forever. That's where I was also introduced to the peer support community, right? There is no experience like any other than one addict or one individual that has gone through trauma or life experiences helping another that is going through the same similar experiences. We share a same language. We share similar shoes that we walk in, and we understand how to guide each other down paths for successful growth. And it really increases hope and how to navigate resources and obtain resources that can help us grow. But then I went back to jail because I still had that warrant out, and I chose to go to rehab and to get clean. But once I went back to jail and I was clean and sober, my entire mindset was different. That perspective I had of being incarcerated was completely different. And I was able to really learn how to be a self-advocate, right? I was able to have improved coping skills. I found a purpose while I was incarcerated, and I wrote letters to lawyers for other inmates, and I held 12-step meetings in the jail, right in the facility. And I made sure that I had the resources that I needed to be successful when I got out. And I created a plan, an actionable plan. And when I finally went before the judge and my lawyer told me that I didn't have a plea deal, I used that self-advocacy and I spoke for myself and I told him how I wanted to get out and stay clean and do all of these things, but that could not happen while I was incarcerated. I just wanted to get my son back. And luckily, my sentence was suspended and I got out that day. Then about 6 months later, I was, still living in Virginia and going through all of, the motions really of the recovery life. And my sister, Kaliana in California, offered me an opportunity to move across the country and change my life. Now, some traumatic experiences had just happened before she offered me this, but I was still clean and sober. And because I stayed clean and sober through these traumatic experiences, she offered me this opportunity. And they say in recovery that when you first get clean, you need to change everything. I finally had my chance to change everything and go somewhere where I knew no one and no one knew me. And that's where I was also introduced to a supportive community that loved me and believed in me and allowed me to find myself for the first time since I was really 15 years old. And at that time, I also started reconnecting with my childhood friends. I had friendships that began to last and friends that I still have to this day. They say that addiction is the disease of isolation and the inability to form long-lasting relationships. Well, when I look back at my life and all of that trauma in my early adulthood, I couldn't keep friends for more than a year. But now I finally had a foundation that I could grow from. And these positive experiences are actually able to counteract your adverse experiences. And there's studies on positive experiences, right? And from this chart, it shows that in a 3-to-1 ratio, well, this is my opinion also, in a 3-to-1 ratio, these positive experiences can counteract the adverse experiences that we go through in our childhood and we continue to go through in our life. And when I look back at all the positive experiences that I began to find and the positive experiences that I was afforded the opportunity to have, that is pretty much the same ratio that I saw. And these positive experiences can be anything, right? It can be an individual sitting down and having a conversation to you and actually listening to you. Because there's a lot of individuals out there that don't have anybody that communicates with them. There's individuals out there like myself in my past where they just did not feel seen and heard. And if you're out there listening, no matter where you are, I want you to know that I see you and I hear you and I am grateful that you are here. So these positive experiences can change our lives and change that life course. Looking back, and now that I've gone to college again and I've started studying social work and eventually public health, I learned, and from my mentor, Miss Ruby Guillen, I learned about this concept called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And with a lot of concepts that I've learned in academia, I had never heard of them before, but then when I did learn about them, I was like, oh my goodness, that's my life. That's so cool. I understand this. I get it, right? And Maslow's hierarchy of needs basically says that there's 5 different tiers, right? And if you stay in psychological distress or you can't feel safety, then you can't feel love and belonging. You can't grow your self-esteem and you can't eventually reach actualization, right? And from somebody who's been impacted by the criminal justice system, the system that we have currently in the United States is built and designed to keep us in these bottom 2 rungs. They want to keep us in that system. They don't want to offer us support to feel that love and belonging. So we have to find it elsewhere from peer mentorship. And then from that, we can feel that love and belonging, that self-esteem, and eventually self-actualization. And while we're doing this, we also need to start setting goals. And SMART goals are great. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're realistic, and they're timely. You need to do all of these things when you set goals. You can't set a goal and say, I'll do this sometime. No, it has to be in this method. And when I start working with individuals in recovery, I want them to start their goals small, right? Let's start with taking a shower if that's a struggle for you. Right? Now, good, you did it today. Let's do it again tomorrow. And then once you've done it for several days in a row, how about we add another thing? How about we take a shower and we make your bed? And then eventually, let's start journaling and writing all the things that we're grateful for. And while it's SMART goals, yes, it needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. But the most important thing is it achievable and is it realistic? We can't set goals for ourselves that we know we are going to struggle to get to. But if we start with these small building blocks of simply taking a shower, the next thing that you know, you can have monumental change. You can decide that you want to go to college, that you want to get a job, that you want to reconnect with your family. And once you've done all of these things, you can realize that the world for all of you is in your hands. All it takes is starting with these small building blocks, one thing to the next. We can't take giant leaps, but we can take baby steps and we can keep going. And my presentation today is also about gratitude, love, unity, and empowerment, right? And the reason that I talked about my childhood trauma and the SMART goals and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is because in order to achieve goals and move into that love, you have to practice certain methods. And one of my favorite things is to practice gratitude, right? We all live in a world where we're on social media and we see, people posting that they're going on these extravagant vacations. They've just bought some new Gucci or Fendi clothes. But you know what? We don't need to compare with them. What are you grateful for today? For me, every day I'm grateful to just wake up in a bed. I'm grateful to be able to take a shower because there were times in my life when those were not possible. If you're grateful for the small things, then you don't need to compare with other people and all of the media that's attacking us. And from gratitude, you can have greater happiness. You can have positive emotions, and you can start building strong relationships. I recommend that all of you journal every night the 3 things that you're grateful for. Data shows that if you do gratitude journals at night, that you will wake up with an increased sense of pride and hope, and you will rest easier. Then there's the power of love. And that's also that 3rd level of Maslow's hierarchy of need, because in order to feel self-actualization, you need to find love. And I'm not talking about, loving a significant other, although that's great, right? But you need to be able to love yourself, because if you cannot love yourself, you can't love anybody else. And that's where the support of communities come in, right? The power of unity. When I think of unity, I think of community, okay? Those last few letters in community. So community changed my life. I was not able to love myself. I did not believe in myself. I wanted every day to die. And then I met some individuals that loved me and believed in me and showed me that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And then eventually I began to love myself. And now I share that love with others that I help. I share that love with my family, with my friends, with anybody that I meet. I always say that I don't have to like you, but I have to love you. I have to love everybody, right? Because there are individuals that just have emotional outbursts or go through the actions that they do because they've never felt love. So why should I be the person to not give that to them? So I want each and every one of you watching today to tell somebody, some stranger, that you love them and that you believe in them and that you are proud of them. And then when you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to look in the mirror and I want you to tell yourself, I love you, I believe in you, I'm proud of you, and you are my hero, because we are all each other's heroes. And there's this great nonprofit that I've been working with in California called Soleil of the Community, and I just wanted to give them a shout out because this organization is all about unity. It is all about empowering the community of single parents in the Antelope Valley and individuals that are coming from marginalized communities in lower socioeconomic areas and giving them resources and opportunities and access to healing modalities and mental health, and they are doing amazing work, right? And I hope that every community has an organization like this. And this organization came from great loss. The executive director of this organization started this nonprofit to help heal her community when she needed to heal herself because her daughter had passed away. So from tragedy, we can find hope and we can have strength and we can find resilience if we practice gratitude, love, unity, and ultimately what this creates is empowerment. Empowerment in ourselves, right? The ability to take the knowledge that we have learned and to do something good and actionable with it. But the most actionable thing that you can do is to empower other individuals with the knowledge and information that you have learned. What good is reading a textbook and learning information or learning how to navigate the system if you do not share that with another individual that is struggling, right? We don't walk this earth alone. We might wear different shoes and we might walk a little bit differently, but we all walk this earth. No matter where you're coming here or watching from, right? No matter where I'm at, we are all walking together so we can walk with the purpose of bettering every individual that we meet. And I hope that you have the best day or evening today. For my empowerment, it happened during COVID, really. I was sick with hepatitis C, and I was like laying in bed and bedridden, and I decided I'm going to start a podcast. So I did that from my bed, and it was a terrible idea because it was so much work, right? The podcast was great, but it was a lot of work. And then I decided I was going to go back to college and start studying social work because I wanted to learn and I wanted to help my fellow, addicts and formerly incarcerated communities. And then I had this idea for an app called Clean, which is a resource directory with a gratitude journal in it to build self-worth. But I had no idea how to build it. And then I was in my introduction to social work class at Long Beach City College in California, shout out. And I met who is now my mentor, Ruby Guillen. She was a guest speaker. And she really inspired me and said, you can build this app, you can do it. And I did not believe her at all. But eventually, as you see, that ended up happening. But what Ruby did is she saw a spark in me and that I was hungry for more and I wanted to learn and that I was eager and that I just wouldn't settle for no. I didn't want to fail. I wanted to help individuals that were struggling and passing away during COVID. And then she introduced me to her brother-in-law, Joseph Powers, who's another one of my mentors. And we all work together at Humanistic Technologies Incorporated now, creating technology to help vulnerable communities. And from there, I got to meet academics like Dr. Abraham Salinas Miranda at the University of South Florida. And I got to hang out with PhDs and doctors while I was going to community college, and it was crazy. But what it really taught me is that I could utilize my lived experience without any academic degrees or validation or anything, and that I could be an advocate. I could belong in spaces and at tables and not feel like I was an imposter. So Dr. Salinas, after I first met him, invited me to present with him at the 9th annual Drug Prevention Summit by Drug Free America. And we presented on adverse childhood experiences. He used me as a case study, so I guess you can say I'm a scientific experiment now. We talked about the app Clean that I had developed with my partners, Ruby and Joseph. But I also began working with youth, right? And I started working with a nonprofit in California called Thrive Alive that specialized in drug education and prevention. And this was a great opportunity because I was able to utilize my experiences to help the younger generations that were struggling just like I was. And to really, teach them about coping skills and more than drug education and prevention, but really focus on those positive experiences. I also facilitated a series with Aim High, which Thrive Alive transitioned from, which was very similar, and I was able to help many youth graduate that program, specifically from like Addict, the Addict organization in California. And I also started working with in the criminal justice field. I became the vice president of the Justice Scholars Club at Long Beach City College. And after learning from my advisor, Dr. Madhavi West, I eventually became the president, which I am this year at the college. And I'm grateful to represent the Long Beach City College Justice Scholars Club today. And we are a student organization that really promotes equity and access to resources on the campus for formerly incarcerated students and provides them a space to be seen, heard, and to grow into leaders. I also, with Ruby and Joseph at Humanistic Technologies Incorporated, got to teach for the Prison Education Project to a youth facility in California on the topic of introduction to soft skills. And this was a great experience because, I remember being incarcerated and to see those teenagers just grow throughout the 8 weeks that we were able to teach them was an amazing experience. I mean, I think by the end of it, they were saying, that they were proud of us and they loved us. And it was an amazing experience to see them go from, I have to be here, to really, I want to be here and interacting, right? And that's what transferring that knowledge and being authentic does. And this is Clean. And what I'm proud of this is the gratitude that I talked about, the unity, the community, and all of these different modalities and concepts went into this app. And it's creating monumental change in the areas that we are pilot testing it in. We're seeing an almost direct correlation between the amount that users interact with the application and their self-worth improving. Right? So I was able to use my lived experience as a recovering addict and put it into a handheld mobile device and creates monumental change. When it comes to criminal justice, my team and I developed an application with a nonprofit in Florida called ETC, Empowered to Change. And we basically took their entire process and digitized it. And now it is not a paper-based process anymore. Individuals re-entering the system aren't having to take buses for 3 hours to turn in paperwork and fail their protocols. No, they can push a button and they can contact their case mentor and give them all the information they need. And then with this time, they are able to feel empowered to make changes and to do actions and to go back to college, or if they're tired, practice self-care and take a nap. But it's their choice. For the first time, they're having a choice. And I'm really excited about this application because we're getting some monumental data that I can't wait for you all to learn about at a later date. And, you know, my mentors, Ruby and Joseph, afforded me I should have updated this slide after last week, afforded me the opportunity to go to Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So, you know, that was kind of a crazy scenario for me. We competed in a hackathon last year, and we just went back last weekend and competed. And I think my favorite story, besides the one I'm going to tell next, is that, you know, I had a pharmacist come up to me and ask me what I did and what area I worked in. And he told me he was in pharmacy, and I said I was too. I was a street pharmacist. He didn't really like that response, right? But I was being authentic and I was being myself, because I'm not going to go to Massachusetts Institute of Technology or Harvard or any other place and not be who I am, right? I'm okay with myself. I'm okay in my skin. And then we went back last week and we worked on our risk assessment tool for child abuse and domestic violence and mental health. And I'm pleased to say that we actually won the grand prize of the Beyond Hack at Massachusetts Institute of Technology for this work that we have been tirelessly working on for, it seems like, ever, but I think it's just been a year. But these are the spaces that I was able to be placed in. And I don't talk about the things that I've been able to do in my recovery and in the past year and with amazing mentorship to promote myself at all, but it's to understand that we don't have to let trauma define us. We don't have to let our adverse experiences define us. With the proper community, with access to resources, with loving and believing in ourselves, we have the opportunity to achieve whatever we want to achieve, right? We can break down barriers from this system that is meant to keep us here. We can reach for the stars in the universe, and there's no stopping us. So if you want to go to Mars, go to Mars. Light your rocket today. And then we've done some other projects as well that I just wanted to highlight. Most importantly, the peer-to-peer curriculum. Joseph developed an amazing peer-to-peer curriculum that we were able to facilitate, and now we have a licensed peer-to-peer program in the state of Florida, which is amazing because we are able to help build the next mentors to individuals that are struggling. And that, facilitating that taught me a lot. I didn't feel like I was capable of really facilitating a course like this, but then I realized under amazing leadership and facilitation and a partner to really do this with, that I was able to do this, right? And that all the experiences that I had were transferable into the academic world as pretty much, as a teacher, as a facilitator. And watching those participants grow was amazing, and watching them transfer that knowledge and information into the real world like the next day was incredible. And then I had an idea for a nonprofit in Florida that kind of culminates everything that I've experienced in my life through my lived experiences and that trauma and everything that I've learned in academia, the life experiences that I've had learning from Ruby and Joseph, from running a nonprofit in California, and really put it all together and understood what youth that are struggling need. And that is where glue of Tampa Bay comes in. Gratitude, love, unity, and empowerment for our youth. And this nonprofit is founded based on data, right? And I'm going to show you two different data sets, both from America, right? Because when I looked at ACEs studies from a global perspective, I really couldn't find much. But just know that childhood trauma exists everywhere, okay? But in Los Angeles County, for instance, 21% of the population under 18 suffers from substance use disorder or uses substances. As they move into their 21% of the population is under 18, but 6% of our youth between the ages of 12 and 17 actually have a substance use disorder. As they move into their transitional age youth, 18 to 25, that number more than triples. So what is happening in their lives between the ages of, let's say, 15 and 25 that magnifies that number. In Pinellas County, Florida, where I live now, 19.7% of Pinellas County students have an ACEs score of 4 or more. If you look back at the presentation earlier when we talked about ACEs, having a score of 4 or more leaves you over 10 times more susceptible to negative health outcomes. So if we're saying 20% of our youth have 4 or more ACEs, are we satisfied with that number? Or can we do more? And that is where GLUE is created. And our goal is mentorship, similar to that peer-to-peer curriculum that I just discussed. We want to teach our youth to become mentors to each other, to know that they are not alone, to share their similar experience after having learned from accredited facilitators. We want to understand adverse childhood experiences, provide positive experiences, and share our knowledge and expertise of experts and the youth that we mentor with the entire community. There's 4 segments to GLUE. We have gratitude and love. We have unity, which is basically the first level, where we're just going to teach positive coping skills and provide art therapy and paint therapy and music therapy and fun experiences for the youth that may have experienced adverse childhood experiences. From that, we begin to teach mentorship. We begin to show them that they have strengths, right? They might be in a home, or you might be in a home where you hear all the time that you're not good enough, but you are good enough, and everyone has strengths. And some of those things that you see as weaknesses might actually be a strength. You just have to change your perspective and look at it in a different light and love yourself. We provide summer camps. We provide events to get the community together and let them know that we are here. We are the glue of the community, and we are here for your youth. And if you want to get involved, come out and seek us out. We are here to empower the community and our youth that are struggling. And then we want to take a deeper look at the data. As you know, I'm into technology. So we want to take our entire curriculum that is developed by, industry leaders and subject matter experts, and we're going to put it all in a mobile application and put it out to the world, to, the United States, to wherever you are. Download the app once it's ready, because we're going to give you free drug education and prevention and teach you positive coping skills. And that entire GLUE curriculum is going to be available, videos, guitar lessons, yoga, all of that. If you are looking for a positive experience and you can't find it where you're at, it'll be here, right? Because it's about empowering the community. It's about empowering our youth, and then share what you learned with others. Who knows? You might be the next yoga instructor after taking a few classes on there. Or you might be the next John Mayer. Who knows? Go to that one next. But really, what the amazing thing is, in finding resilience and strength through gratitude, love, unity, and empowerment, is realizing that all of the trauma that we may have experienced, all of the circumstances that we go through, are actually transferable into actionable moments where we can help support ourselves and other individuals. There was a time in my life when I never thought that I would, see my son more than weekends. There was a time in my life when I didn't think that I would ever be more than a junkie. There was a time in my life where I wanted to die. And I look at the world today, and I see a lot of individuals that, are going through similar circumstances that I did. And it would not be fair of me to share my experiences so that they can understand that there is hope. And this is all about building hope and resiliency and providing positive impacts to every individual we meet. So, as I said earlier, if no one told you today that they love you, that they believe in you, that they are proud of you, I am all of that for you. And if you ever forget, just remember my voice saying that right now. And know that the International Youth Conference and all of the amazing individuals that help put this on are here for you. You can always go back and watch these segments. They are, streamed live, but then they're saved. So go back and learn. If you hear something that you want to learn more about, reach out, get involved. Right? You have the opportunity. We all have the opportunity right now to say that the way that the system is now and the world that we are experiencing is not what we want. you have the opportunity to go out and spread that message and advocate for yourself and for the community to be able to get the resources and the opportunities that you need. Don't be afraid. Be yourself. Be authentic. And if you find yourself in a community or in an environment where you feel as though you don't belong, you do belong. Just step aside and you'll find that right community. Well, I've done a lot of amazing things over the past 2 years, and being here speaking at an international youth conference is maybe one of those crazy amazing things, considering I was homeless 7 years ago and struggling for so long. But the most amazing thing that I've ever done in my life is I was able to regain custody of my son Matthew. I never thought that would happen, but my mentors, Ruby and Joseph, really helped guide me through this process. And in June of last year, I was able to regain full custody of my son. In July of last year, we ended up moving to Florida to start our new lives together. And I will say this, for anyone who might be separated from their children, and have a desire to get them back, but you feel that it's never going to happen. Or if you come from a broken family, just know that in order to be able to make this moment happen, you have to love yourself and believe in yourself and be proud of yourself. I always used to say that I would only get clean and sober if I got my son back. But then I realized I had to get clean and sober to get my son back. So I had to reverse that language. And now I will say that it is probably the most challenging thing I've ever done, being a dad full time, but it's the most rewarding. And we're learning a lot from each other, and he makes me a better person every day. And I'm grateful that I'm able to share my experience, strengths, and hope with him on a daily basis, even when I feel like I'm not good enough as a dad. I have people around me that remind me that I am. So for all of you that are out there listening, just know that there is hope. And don't be hopeful just for today, but be hopeful for all of the tomorrows. Thank you for letting me share my story. Thank you for being here. And I'm extremely grateful for all of you, no matter where you are. Thank you. And if there's any questions, I don't know if I ran over time, but thank you.